Hello, thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. This is my first of hopefully many UEFN tutorials. This one here is what I like to call creature controller. So you can use the wildlife spawner device, and any rideable wildlife you can almost control as your player character, as you see here. And you can actually even still use items. You can see here the throwing beam, and this is a shockwave grenade. So you can throw it, launch your wildlife like this. But you could use weapons, other throwables, things like that. So let's see how it's done. I'm just gonna start out with the devices we need. So the first one is gonna be the wildlife spawner. Find that here. Let's place it in front of us for now. I'm gonna configure this real quick. So we'll just start with the wolf. You need to use the boar, the wolf, or the raptor, as these are the only mountable wildlife we have at the moment. As more become available, you should be able to use those as well, but the boar, wolf, and raptor is what we have to work with now. Just going to go through some of the settings here. The team indexes shouldn't matter, as you'll tame it when you ride it anyways, but just to keep things uniform here, keep them all in team 1. The infinite spawn won't matter because we're not going to do anything to despawn it. Spawn on timer. Do that just so it'll spawn right as the game starts. Spawn radius, keep it small just so we know the location. Activation shouldn't matter. And the wander range we're going to turn down. I guess we'll keep it at 10. Just to keep it again in the same location so we know where it's at. Force spawn, again, shouldn't matter, it should just spawn right away. Riding is the important one to turn on here. And if you want to prevent the player from dismounting, you can do that as well, just in the wildlife spawner. And then again, these are just kind of unimportant for what we're doing. So we have the wildlife spawner. And now the trick to hide the player is actually in the orbit camera device. Bring that in. Now the position of the camera doesn't matter too much. It's kind of up to you. We are going to add the player on start, check that to false. You can keep it on start if you'd like to have the animal spawn from the start right away. I can show you a way to do that, but for this tutorial we're going to be activating it with the trigger. So we're just gonna set a basic distance and everything, speed, and the key for this trick is hiding the player character. So this is in the orbit camera. So now we have the orbit camera, which hides the player and then changes the location of the camera as well, and the wildlife spawner, which we will ride the wildlife, and as the player is hidden, the wildlife will remain visible. So it creates the illusion that you're playing as the wildlife that you're riding. Then lastly, for the trigger, we're just going to use a button for the sake of the tutorial. Let's push this over here. Make sure it's at a good height. As I was saying, if you wanted to do it just right from the start, you could have the camera add the player on start, and then instead of the button with the ride function in the wildlife spawner, you would use the spawn pad. So as the player spawns in, they're immediately put on the animal. But as I stated, the sake of the tutorial, we're going to use just the button device. So as we can see, on the button press, we will ride the wildlife. So we need to actually add the camera as well, or the player will be visible. Okay, so it's pretty simple. That should be everything. We'll jump in here and test it in a second. But just to go over it again real quick, the player presses the button. On interact with the button, the wildlife spawner puts the character on the wildlife, and then the camera is added to the player, which will hide the player but not the wildlife. So let's jump in and see if it works. Alright, now that we're in game, we see our wolf has spawned here. So on, interact with the button. Here we go. You can see it worked. So you can move forward, backward, you can sprint, you can jump. Keeps all the locomotion and everything. And then another, so here's the dismount. As you can see, we are still invisible. Now if we wanted to have the player come back on after dismounting, here we can see on dismounted is a function we have. So in the camera, we can remove from player. And when we want to remove it, we want to remove it when the wildlife spawner on dismounted. So now the player will be visible once we come off of the wildlife, and then invisible once we jump back onto it. If we were to interact with the wildlife, we wouldn't have the camera placed on, so we can actually add that as well. On ridden. So this is just if the player goes up and holds interact on the animal, this will still place the camera on them. Now another cool trick I wanted to show off is you can actually still use items and weapons. So even though you're invisible, you can still use things like the shockwave grenades. This is just an item granter. It will grant the item on start, so we don't have to pick it up or anything. So as you can see on the wolf here, we can actually still see the aim archway or visual. Gives you a little bit of an idea of where you're throwing. Yeah, then you could still use items. You could throw shockwaves around, shoot guns, anything you could normally do on a wildlife. Things like the grappler and movement items, they will dismount you from it. And we can also see the dismount trick there. Player is visible after dismount. And after riding as well, player is invisible again. Thank you for watching. I plan to have some more tutorials out in the future. If you have any recommendations, requests, or questions about this tutorial, please leave them in the comments below. Appreciate you watching.